Hello, everyone. Welcome to my new show, Out of Nowhere. Well, I went for my pre-op the other day for my hip. That will be done in 6 weeks' time. I'm looking forward to getting that done. I've had both my knees done now. And then my left hip's going to be first, and then my right hip later. I'll be like a bionic man. But hopefully I feel 10 times better. Well, I have got a terrific guest on my show today. His name is Malcolm Robinson. Malcolm is the founder of the Strange Phenomena Investigation. He's also an author, a lecturer. His books include UFO Case Files, Scotland 1 and 2, Paranormal Case Files, Great Britain 1, 2, 3, and 4. He's a paranormal researcher, author. Malcolm will be talking about the UFOs and the Loch Ness Monster. Can we please welcome Malcolm to the show? Hello there.
Hi there, Bob. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I'm looking forward to sharing some wonderful stories with your good self and your lovely listeners.
Thank you. Got plenty of people in the chat room already. There's Diane, Rebecca, Steph. Quite a few already in the chat room. So they're always, if they've got any questions, put them in capitals and I will relay to Malcolm. Me about what made you interested in the Loch Ness Monster?
Well, as a small boy growing up in Scotland, my father regaled me with these tales of a water kelpie. That's what we Scots call a water horse, or in other words, monsters, Loch Ness Monster, etc. And I was absolutely fascinated by this, Bob, and after a few years, we went on family holidays up to Inverness, and needless to say, I just had to see Loch Ness as well. So we went to Loch Ness. We went on one of those cruise, not a cruise ship, but one of these pleasure boats on Loch Ness. And I was just a young boy. I was probably about 10 or 11. And I got my father's binoculars, and I honestly thought that I saw 3 humps in the water at that young age, but I obviously probably was mistaken. It was probably just what we call a standing wave, where one boat traverses south, one boat traverses north, and the bow wave meets in the middle and it looks like humps. And that's given rise to many false reports. But so really as a wee boy, of course, other than that, it was UFOs and ghosts and poltergeists. But Nessie was very, very dear to my heart as a young boy growing up,
I can imagine so, because it's famous around the world.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, obviously, we're looking at Loch Morar as well. There's a number of Scottish lochs that allegedly harbour some form of creature or water kelpie, call it what you will. There's lakes and lochs spread across Europe and Scandinavia, which also has sightings of their own strange fabled beasties. So there's clearly something there. And when we consider the fact that we're finding new species of frogs and insects on this planet on a regular basis, and let us not also forget that in 1938, off the coast of Madagascar, fishermen caught in their nets a prehistoric fish called the coelacanth. Now, that was thought extinct, for millions of years, and they're being found. So it's not within the bounds of possibility that there's some kind of hybrid or some strange creature in the bowels of Loch Ness.
Tell us about going down in the submarine. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I had an opportunity to go down in the Loch Ness submarine way back in 1994. And it was one of these opportunities that I couldn't miss. They were taking members of the public down into Loch Ness in their submarine for I think it was £68.50 for the hour. And this was to help fund the research, because this was a research submarine. When it hit the bottom, there was a telescopic rod inserted into the soil deposits at the floor of Loch Ness, and then they pulled that back up. And on the surface, when you opened up this tube, it was like, you know, the rings of a tree, all these circles, deposits over millennia, thousands and thousands of years, and it dictated what the weather conditions was like. Now, this submarine was about 15, 20 feet long, red and white submarine. The front of the submarine had a glass-heavy portal, toughened glass, with around 6 or 7 strong halogen lights. And in the floor of the submarine, there was another portal as well. And we were moored at Drumnadrocket, just across from the Drumnadrocket Hotel. And the skipper of the submarine did all these kind of, you know, he told us all about the safety, the do's and the don'ts. And let me tell you this, Bob, if you were, you know, frightened of confined spaces, this was not a place for you or anyone else to be in.
But
It
I
was
am.
so confined. And, you know, there were water trickling down the sides. Anyway, long story short, we dived down to quite an extensive depth. And, you know, I did a lot of filming through the portal, and some of that footage is on Loch Ness, but it was a wonderful, wonderful occasion. And the water is crystal clear once you penetrate about 12 feet of the peat-stained waters, you know, coming down off the hills. It is peat-stained for about 12 feet, but once you get by that, it's crystal clear. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been so many sightings of the Loch Ness monster over the years.
Yeah,
what it did in the water, and everybody thought it was. Yeah, you carry on, Malcolm.
Yeah, I mean, the history and ecology of Loch Ness, you know, it's the Great Glen Fault, you know, that was there about 250 million years ago. And it's been stated that there's more water in Loch Ness than all the other British loch and lakes put together, which is absolutely incredible. Another stat that I find most incredible is the fact that someone said that you can get the population of the whole world in Loch Ness 3 times over. I mentioned a moment ago about the coelacanth, but yeah, it's incredible, you know. I should also mention that when Shea Blythe, the famous rower, rode the Atlantic in 1969, he himself, along with his companion, claimed he saw a sea serpent, a long, tapering, snaking neck in the Atlantic Ocean. So, yeah, you know, these things are everywhere.
I'm going to say there's one in Canada seen as well, aren't they?
Yeah, I believe it's called Ogopogo, and it's very similar to what's been seen and sighted in Loch Ness. I mean, as a young boy, you know, as a teenager, I interviewed many people around the shores of Loch Ness. Alex Campbell, for instance, who was a water bailiff, and a lady called Aldi Mackay approached Alex and said, "Look, this is in 1933, Bob." She says, "I saw this tremendous commotion on the surface of the loch, boiling foam, and in this, like a big humped back, like a whale." And when Alex Campbell heard that, because he was a correspondent for the Inverness Courier, he automatically dispatched this info to the editor, and the editor then said the famous words like, "Well, if what she saw was as big as that, it must have been a monster." So hence the term Loch Ness Monster.
There's been so many sightings. You know, what they actually seen then, Malcolm?
Well, there's people should understand. It's like you know, ufology, and people can misinterpret things in the sky. When tourists come to Loch Ness, they're not that well versed in the sightings and the moods of the loch. It can change dramatically in a matter of minutes. You have a lot of waterfowl, you know, diving into the loch. You have otters, you have seals. Admittedly, not a lot, very occasionally. And people tend to see these humps, either be 1 hump, 2 humps, or 3 humps. But in the main, for me personally, a lot of that is just people misconstruing boat wakes, for sure. What is interesting to me is the long slender neck with a small sheep-like head attached to the end of the neck. And I remember I interviewed Father Gregory Brucey, who was a monk at the Benedictine Abbey at Fort Augustus. And in 1971, he had an organist from the Westminster Cathedral. And he was on holiday, took him down to the jetty at the southern end of Loch Ness, and the loch was like a sheet of glass. Not a ripple, Bob, not a ripple. Then suddenly, as if on cue, this big long neck and small head thrust out from the bowels of Loch Ness and cascaded back into the loch again. Now, that's not to say men of the cloth don't lie. Police officers lie, we know that. And, you know, any investigator will tell you we're usually dealing with witness testimony, sometimes alongside a photograph or a piece of movie footage, all which has to be methodically checked. And, you know, so we're still trying to ascertain what exactly is in Loch Ness. But it's fair to say that whatever is in Loch Ness, would you believe, it's protected by an old Inverness bylaw, which states that anyone caught harming Nessie or capturing Nessie is liable for imprisonment. And of course, that did not go down too well with my plans to capture Nessie in 1997, which made all the Scottish newspapers.
Did Spielberg want you to help out to catch Messi?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the story how that came about was I got a phone call from a journalist at the Scottish Sun newspaper, and he says, Malcolm, Ted Danson, the actor, is doing a movie about Loch Ness, and I just want your thoughts, Malcolm, on what's in Loch Ness, etc. And I says, well, funnily enough, I've got this plan, this device, this cage that I hope may capture Nessie. And he says, pray tell me more. So if you can imagine, and also your listeners can imagine, a boxing ring, you know, the ropes. Okay, imagine it very, very tall, about 45 feet tall, vertical. Now, on these ropes would be these spherical balls containing radio biopsy darts. Inside this boxing ring, which would be moored near Urquhart Castle, would be a device continually turning out fish puree. So any large animal pushing against this trap, this you know, as soon as it hit the wires, the cables, it would release these radio biopsy darts, hitting this creature, neutralize it, not killing it, but neutralizing it. So this journalist thought, wow, okay. So he went away, and it made massive news coverage in Scotland. Then a few days later, he called up and says, Malcolm, you'll never believe who's interested in your trap and who's willing to put money in to make it happen. I went, who? He says, Steven Spielberg, the movie mogul. And sadly, it never bore fruition because Steven Spielberg went on to do other movies and it fell flat. But I still feel today that it's worthy of attention. Indeed, myself and a colleague called Robert, I forget his surname at the moment, we're going to do something, hopefully, if not later this year, certainly next year, which we already have a boat, we have a crew, we have the sonar. And our plan is to drop down into the loch a massive big net containing, you know, dead fish, etc., as an attractant. We hope to get funding to get a small ROV, you know, submarine with cameras, with lights. And if anything moves into that area, then maybe we can film it. And we'll be positioning for about a week, 2 weeks in Vermoriston, Drumnadrochit, Fort Augustus, foyers, doors, etc. So we'll be moving around the loch. So maybe that's something that hopefully will bear fruit either this year or next year.
Sounds interesting. Is that, you know, the guy who put his RV outside of the loch? Is he still there after all these years? I forget his name.
Yeah, his name is Steve Feltham. He packed up, I don't know how many, good number of years ago. He's in the Guinness Book of Records for the most continuous Nessie watch ever. And I forget how many years he's been there, but it's quite substantial. He packed in his girlfriend, he packed in his job, he bought an old kind of van, a grocery van, decked it out, and motored all the way up to Loch Ness, and he's been there ever since. And he's based at Doors, the small village of Doors. And he's a lovely chap, you know, and God bless him. He's only had about 2 Nessie sightings, but he lives in hope that maybe he'll see something significant one day.
Yeah, yeah. First question of the day coming up in a minute. This is from Rebecca. Question for Malcolm. Hiya, Malcolm. How old were you when you saw the levitating shoe fly through the window?
Somebody's been reading my book. Probably about, yeah, probably about, oh my goodness, about 7, 8 or 9. I can't remember. It was round about that time. For the listeners that's not aware of the story, and what happened was I stayed in a small village called Tullabuddy in Clackmannanshire in central Scotland. And my mother came home one day with a pair of shoes. And I didn't like them. Oh, I didn't like them. She says, "Come on, son, I bought these shoes for you now. Come on, put them on." And in a kind of typical childish mood, I picked up one of the shoes and I threw it down towards the settee. It was definitely going down towards the settee. And before it hit the settee, it stopped in midair, rose up into the air and smashed through the window, smashed through. And of course, my mother said, why did you do that, son? And I says, it wasn't me, you know. But that's the story of that. And it's one of these, people ask, do you have many stories in your childhood? And that was one of many. Yeah, the shoe going through the window.
I know, just going back to Nessie, a lot of locals but they don't like people going round Nessie. Have you heard that story saying we like to keep it to ourselves?
I don't know about that so much now. Maybe that was in the past. I mean, admittedly, you know, Nessie is a massive tourist attraction. I won't deny that. And it brings in a lot of revenue for the people around Loch Ness and Scotland as a whole. And I mean, I was there just over a year ago, and you know, nearly every shop's got a fluffy model Nessie and a plastic Nessie, etc. But then again, when you think about all the other areas across the world, even Elvis Presley Boulevard, you know, it's full of dancing little Elvises that you can buy for your car. So no matter if it's the most strangest thing in the world, you'll always find an entrepreneur ready to make money out of that. You'll get that in UFOs, you'll get
Yes.
it in Nessie. So it's one of these things, Bob, yeah.
I can imagine so. Another question for Malcolm. This is a good one. Robert Taylor's trousers.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, that's a well-known case, the Robert Taylor trousers. There can't be many listeners tuning into your show that doesn't know this story, but I'll try and be very, very brief because it is massive. This is to answer who posed the question? Was that a gentleman or a lady?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened
Steph. That was Steph.
Steph, yeah. So what happened, Steph, on the morning of November the 9th, 1979, forestry worker Robert Taylor was employed by Livingston Development Corporation in the forestry department. And he was a war hero. Prior to that, he went over to France in D-Day 5. He had a tank regiment that helped liberate Bergen-Belsen, one of the most horrible Nazi concentration camps. After the war, he settled back in Scotland, and on this morning, November the 9th, he was walking along a forestry path accompanied by his Irish red setter dog. He had no interest in UFOs whatsoever. And what did he see? He came upon a clearing, and about 30, 40 feet above the grass was this large dome-shaped craft with a flange going around its perimeter, cross-light projections sticking up from the flange, and then it's disappeared, solidified. desolidified, solidified. He could see the young trees in the background, and he's going, "What the bloody hell is this? What's going on here?" And his dog was barking furiously beside him. And as if the whole scenario couldn't get any more bizarre, Bob, it did, because as you know the case yourself, Bob, but what happened was what resembled two Second World War sea mines descended
Yeah, I
from
do. Yeah.
beneath the socket. That's correct, yeah. And these mine-like devices hit the grass, rolled
Yeah.
towards him, and pulled him forcibly towards this object. He lost consciousness. When he regained consciousness, he had a nasty graze under his chin, on his head. His trousers was torn, his jersey was muddy. He had a terrible headache, a terrible thirst. He tried to radio base in his pickup truck, but he couldn't speak. He had lost his voice. He managed to reverse the truck into a ditch. The back wheels are spinning. I'm being very quick here because it's quite a big case. When he got back home, when his wife saw him, she went, what's happened to you?
It's okay.
And he said, "I've been attacked." Attacked by what? And he said, "By a spaceship thing." And she says, "Look, you better come in. There's no such things as spaceships." And then she thought, "Wait a minute. I've been married to this man for over 30 years. He wouldn't make up something like this." So long story short, the police became involved. I became involved, as did Andy Collins, Martin Keatman, Stuart Campbell. I saw the marks in the grass myself. I took photographs of them. And later on in years, a couple of things happened. First of all, it was Philip Mantle, my good friend, who was working for Bufora. And he says, "Malcolm, here's the trousers. You're in Scotland, I'm in England. It's best that you have them." These trousers, incidentally, were analysed by the police forensic department at Bathgate and also Edinburgh by a gentleman by the name of Lester Knibb, who said that these trousers, these rips in the trousers, were made in an upwards manner, and they were not made by any forest debris, no sharp stones, twigs, etc. And so I got the trousers off Phil. I've been offered thousands and thousands of pounds by a gentleman in America to part with them. In no way would I do that, Bob. They'll stay here in Scotland, you know. And it's nice to have them, because anybody that's seen me talk, I always like to have the trousers with me. Let the people, see the trousers, feel the trousers, touch the trousers. It's a part of British ufology history. And I've often called it the Turin threads of ufology. So it's just nice to have them. And I often wonder, when people like me and big ufologists all over the world, not me, I'm not a big ufologist, I know nothing, but when we pass away ourselves, what happens? What happens to all our memorabilia, all our books, all our research papers? Well, I know that Philip Mantle and other researchers have passed that on. When they pass away themselves, it's going to a museum. My collection is going to a chap called Claes Svan in Sweden. He has a museum over there. When it's my turn to go over to Spirit Side, he will get all these, all my case reports, etc. However, I would like the trousers to go to the Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh. And although, people may say, well, that's a bit crazy. Well, is it really? It's another item. It's something I'm sure the people will find of interest. So we'll see what happens with that.
They're going to say it'd be better to keep it in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, it's best to keep certainly the trousers there,
Can we,
because... Yes, Bob?
What have happened there, yeah.
There is a delay in the...
Can we touch on the 417? Okay. I'll speak, and then hopefully we'll get back to normal in a minute. The A-70 abduction case.
Yes. That was a very, very big case, of course. One of the biggest cases I've dealt with. Like most people, I was aware of, abduction cases coming from America and Canada, but I personally hadn't researched them. I was aware of the cases, but I had nothing to do with them. So I was sitting on the fence with that. And then along comes two gentlemen from Edinburgh who told me this incredible tale. And I just decided that I would have to look more closely at this and find out what was going on. Again, most people will know about this case. I've spoken wildly and about this case on different podcasts, but for any listener that's not aware, I'll try and be very brief. It's another big case. August 1992. Gary Wood, Colin Wright were driving in a car leaving the built-up city of Edinburgh in central Scotland to their destination of a small village called Tarbrax to drop off a satellite system. Like most people, Gary and Colin had no interest in UFOs. They were aware of it on TV and newspapers, but it was the furthest thing from their mind. All that changed. All that changed on the evening of August 1992. They're travelling down August 18th, I think it was. And as they were travelling down this road, which is a B road, it's not a popular road. It's not a heavy road for a lot of traffic. As they approached a blind bend, it swept to the left. They were astonished to see a large black two-tiered disc hovering about 50, 60 feet above the surface of the road. And both men knew straight away this wasn't a conventional aircraft, a conventional helicopter. What was this? So rather than stop the car in the road and do a three-point turn and go back, they says, no, we're going to go to Tarbrax. Foot down on the metal, foot down on the gas, and they scream towards this object, hovering above the road. Now, this is night time. And then what happened was, it was like an instantaneous silver shimmering curtain descended from beneath this hovering black object and hit the car. And as soon as this effect hit the car, both men were enveloped in total and inky blackness. They couldn't see their hands in front of their face. They couldn't see the dashboard of the car. They couldn't see each other. Are we dead? They thought they were dead. Seconds later, or what appeared to be seconds later to them, they regained their sight. The car was on the other side of the road. Gary had to grab the steering wheel and pull it back to the left-hand side of the road. And they didn't stop. They screamed to their destination. And they hammered on the person's door who they were going to see. No answer, no answer, no answer. And eventually a window opened up above the door, and it was the lady of the house. She says, "What time do you call this? Do you know what time this is?" They were an hour and a half later, Bob. They had left at half 10, and it was an hour and a half later. The journey should only have taken about 30, 35 minutes. And they proceeded to tell them about this crazy, strange thing floating in the sky. Now, that night and subsequent nights thereafter, both men had horrible dreams of these small grey beings, the type that Whitley Strieber has seen, 3.5, 4 feet tall, large pear-shaped head, black inky almond-shaped eyes, and coming into their dream world. And then they found scars on their body that previously were not there.
Oh.
We all know our bodies, Bob. We know when we go in the shower or the bath, we know, these were fresh. So Gary said to himself, surely this can't be one of those crazy UFO stories. What if it is? Who do you turn to? So long story short, they got in touch with myself, and I advocated the use of regressive hypnosis as a tool to drag out any possible subconscious memory. It's a very dangerous tool, hypnosis. People can lie under hypnosis. It could be kryptonesia. It could be a whole range of things. But the police use it, in certain cases. So under hypnosis, the following is what happened under hypnosis. The car was stopped. They suddenly saw 4 or 5 small beings, the grey beings, come towards the car and taking them out the car. Now, there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences with this case. Because believe it or not, for what it's worth, Gary found himself placed on a floating stretcher, right? These wee greys were not holding it. They were standing next to it. But Colin was getting walked towards this object. They found themselves in this strange circular room. Independently, they were taken to different parts of wherever it may be, call it what you will, a UFO, whatever. They were both stripped naked. Gary found himself on a flat raised table above the ground, and he says, Malcolm, I couldn't move a muscle. I could only move my eyes. I desperately wanted to punch one of these, and I'll say the words, these wee buggers. That was his words. And he says, I couldn't move. I could not move. And then he said he saw one of them was holding like a pendulum, a diamond-shaped pendulum in its hands, and it was moving it around his feet and his body. And Gary says he felt his stomach was like there was a hand inside his stomach pulling his entrails, moving him all about. He said it was a horrible sensation. He also remembers seeing a young girl, about 17, 18, on the floor, again, completely naked. She had her knees up under her chin. She had her arms folded around her legs, and she turned round very, very slowly in Gary's direction. She had tears running down her face. And Gary says, Malcolm, I'll never forget that forlorn face. It was so sad. It was so, desperate. And there's so much more to this case that I could talk about, but that's kind of the guts here. Do I believe them? Absolutely. Do I believe the hypnosis aspect? I'm sitting on the fence with that. We used a wonderful hypnotherapist, a lady by the name of Helen Walters, and sadly she passed away last year. Also on that case was my good friend Billy Devlin and Ron Halliday, but it was a massive case. Yeah, good case.
Right, we've got a question from Rebecca. Malcolm, could you tell us the other stories of your paranormal and ghostly experiences? Thank you. That's Rebecca.
Oh, she wants one of my many, many tales. Okay, I'll see what I can dig out for the recent
please.
of my mind. Well, first and foremost, Rebecca, I started out to disprove all these subjects. Most people know that. In 1979, when I formed Strange Phenomena Investigations, I thought it was a load of rubbish. There's no such things as ghosts and poltergeists and UFOs. And I'm going out on a one-man crusade, and I'm going to prove it's a load of rubbish. Well, Rebecca, like anything else in life, my dear, there's no smoke without fire. And one of the cases that I dealt with was I was in this lady's house in Tullabuddy. She had terrible manifestations of poltergeist activity. Terrible things were happening. We were in, with members of SPI, we were in the bedroom, we had all the lights out, and we had the video recorders going, the audio recorders going, and nothing was happening. And then I questioned myself, Malcolm, why do you do this? Nothing happens. And then suddenly, bang, just on cue. As soon as I said that, the whole room illuminated by thousands and thousands of tiny pinpricks of white light. I've likened it to a children's handheld sparkler on November the 5th. It was everywhere, all over the walls, the ceiling, the carpet, your body, the floor, your shoes. It was everywhere. And within maybe about 18, 19 seconds, it dissipated. It stopped. And the room was once more plunged into darkness. So with fingers crossed, we went to the VCR equipment. This was in the days before, digital, etc. And because we had all these cameras on tripods, we went to the VCR and we pressed stop, we pressed rewind, and nothing was captured on videotape. And even if we had caught that magical, spectacular light show, the skeptics would have poo-pooed it. I mean, another case, just for Rebecca, when I lived in Hastings, I put on lectures in Hastings, and a lady who worked for the local hospital says, Malcolm, one of our leading surgeons is off his work due to stress. And I went, well, obviously, it's a tough job. Leading surgeon is tough. Oh, no, you don't understand, Malcolm. Well, tell me. So what she said to me was the following. This leading surgeon was walking down the hospital corridor and he saw an elderly gentleman standing looking at the ceiling. And the surgeon went up to him, you okay? Are you all right, sir? I think so. I'm not sure. And then at that, the surgeon's pager went off. He says, excuse me, sir, hold on. And the surgeon looked at his pager. He said he was wanted in the resuscitation room. And he went to say goodbye to the gentleman, but he thought he was no there. He wasn't there. He must have went through swing doors, which he was standing next to swing doors. So I think you know where I'm going with this story, Rebecca, but there is a twist. So what happened was that when, I'm sure you do, Bob. So when the surgeon went into the resus room, who's lying on the bed with the paddles on his chest? Yes, the man in the corridor. So here's the twist. Let's look at the closed circuit television. Surely you will have caught that man in the corridor speaking to the surgeon. So the rewound CCTV cameras, you saw the surgeon walking down the corridor, stopping and talking to nothing at all. So that is just two of many, many, many stories I've got, Rebecca and Bob.
Brilliant. Before we move on, because Steph got another question, psychic energy.
Yes. Psychic energy. Well, yeah, I mean, they say everybody's born psychic. Some people are born with tremendous abilities. And some people, you can develop that. You can develop your psychic energy. There's books aplenty on Amazon all about how to develop your psychic energy. And in point of fact, I'm actually reading one just now. So there is something there. Clearly, there is something there. Not everybody is psychic. I remember SPI were dealing with another haunted house, and we could clearly see that the lady herself was psychic. She was like a magnet towards these spirit influences. And when we said that, we think possibly you could be psychic, madam, her words were, I don't want to be bloody psychic. And you can't blame her, So there is this psychic energy. There is this psychic energy which clearly each and every one of us can develop. SPI have worked with some fantastic psychic mediums. We're working with Stephen Bird at the moment, and I've attended some of his clairvoyance and his meetings at spiritualist churches across central Scotland, and he's absolutely marvellous. It's not cold reading, it's not body language, it's not, and when you see people in the audience with hankies at their eyes, tears running out, it's not generalizations. This is really, really, really tight names, addresses, etc. So when someone has that ability, the psychic ability to do that, then it's just wonderful. And I'm just so happy to be working with Stephen Birds and also Alison Dunlop Shanes and Ian Shanes, who's also fantastic with SPI as well.
Yeah, she is, yeah. Now, Steph's next question is, Malcolm, have you done any investigation into is it Boleskine house? And if so, what were they? Thank you. Is it Boleskine?
I think there are different ways to say Boleskine or Boleskine. Well, I haven't researched Boleskine House or Boleskine House myself personally. For anybody that's not aware of the house and what it's all about, it sits on the shores of Loch Ness, and initially it was home to Aleister Crowley, who was once dubbed the most evilest man in the world, because in this house back in its day, Aleister Crowley and his followers did a lot of magic ceremonies and conjured up demons aplenty. People have speculated that maybe it was Aleister Crowley who put this mythical creature in the loch, but it wasn't Aleister, because Nessie was sighted in the loch hundreds of years before Aleister Crowley came there. Loch Ness came into prominence in the 1930s, and it wasn't until later that Aleister Crowley was there. The house was then taken over by a lead guitarist from Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page. It burned down under mysterious circumstances some years ago, and I believe it's now been rebuilt. But other than that, no, I haven't done any research on it. I'm aware that it's one of these places you don't always want to go to, even though it's been done up and totally changed, you know.
Tell us about your own UFO sighting as a kid in school, in the school ground.
Yeah, again, this is, again, I'll probably be about 10 or 11, and had no knowledge about UFOs or anything supernatural really at that time. I think that shoe incident came a few years later. Anyway, I was playing football on a warm summer's night in Scotland. Yes, it is a rarity, we do get them. And so I was only about 10, kicking the ball about, and there were not a cloud in the sky. And then suddenly I looked up and I saw this egg-shaped object about 20, 25 feet, like an egg on its side, not vertical, horizontal. And everybody stopped kicking the ball about, and we're all standing there, young boys, looking up at this thing in a clear blue sky. And we went, what on earth is that? And then my friends got fed up of watching this and they started to kick the ball about. Apart from me, my gaze was affixed to this thing, which was only about 100 feet above my head in the air, you know. And as soon as I looked away from it, which I did, sadly, for about a second, as soon as I put my eyes back up, of course, it was gone. It was not there, you know, it disappeared. It didn't suddenly float away like a balloon. It was not a balloon. I mean, if it was, you would have seen it flying away. It was just gone, you know. And I remember doing some research at Loch Ness as well. We spoke about Nessie earlier. After a day's work interviewing people around the loch, I was sharing a campfire with some German people, Australian people, American people at Inverness camp and caravan site. And it was a lovely, lovely night, starry night. And suddenly this lady in the party screamed out, "What the hell is that?" And we cast our gaze across Loch Ness to the other side of Loch Ness. And you could see the silhouette of the rolling hills on the other side of the Ness. And on the other side of it, above the hills, is this big, massive white ball. Now, this is nighttime, moving up and down and left and right and zig and zag. And it was like, what is this, you know? And what we always do, any researcher will tell you this, Bob, that you have to check with the airports to see if anything was flying in the air at that time. The Ministry of Defence, with any air exercises, you'll contact the local police to see if any members of the public had reported something the same or similar. So you dot the I's and cross the T's. And after we did all that, Bob, there were nothing flying in the air at that time, you know. And it's just, I mean, as you know, ufology, UFO sightings, it's not a UK phenomena. It's a global phenomena. It's been with us throughout time. We've seen it in Renaissance paintings. We've seen it in cave art, etc. So the big problem that I have is I cannot, with any certainty, answer why. I could speculate till the cows come home, you know, about abductions and why we have abductions. But clearly we do have a UFO problem, for want of a better word. It's ongoing. But I think they're so vastly technologically advanced to humankind that we cannot comprehend it. It's like Admiral Nelson being whisked inside a nuclear submarine and somebody saying, "Right, Nelson, what do you think of this then?" You know, or a caveman put out of his cave and put into New York Square. "What do you think of this?" The technology is vast. We are so insignificant to them, you know. And the problem we have with abductions is that they are taking people out of the comfort of their own homes and they're experimenting them on, and they're coming back very traumatized. And that's not on as far as I'm concerned. So what are they trying to do? Are they trying to genetically modify us, change us? And if so, for what? I don't know. I really don't know.
I know. I was just thinking something in me head to ask you, and Rebecca's beat me to it, but it's a good question. Malcolm, what are your thoughts on the subjects like astral travel or remote viewing?
Yeah, astral traveling and remote viewing is wonderful subjects, and I've never managed to do it. I've had books on astral traveling and the techniques, etc. So we'll start with that first, the astral traveling. I mean, I've had lucid dreams, and there may be listeners listening to your show that has had lucid dreams. Okay, that's not astral traveling, admittedly. But for those not in the know, a lucid dream is when you suddenly realize in your dream, hey, I'm dreaming. This is not real. This is amazing. I can do anything I want. You can fly, you can go through walls, etc. So, but astral traveling, the books of Robert A. Monroe and others like him is incredible. And again, for those not in the know, some people can leave their body in this astral etheric realm and move wherever they want to. They just need to think, I want to go to Aunt Sally's house. Bang, they're there. Sometimes Aunt Sally will see a misty shape in the room, and it will be confirmed to her when the person says, yeah, it was it was me, it was me. And it's a wonderful thing to have. And hopefully any listeners of your show will tell you their own stories, etc., about astral traveling. And sorry, what was the other one again? I forgot already. What Rebecca said?
Remote viewing.
Oh, of course.
Remote viewing.
That was the one. Again, that's something where you can get coordinates of a certain place. You don't know where that is. For instance, say I gave you coordinates, Bob, and I says, okay, Bob, you look at that and pretend you're a remote view. And I want you, Bob, to go to these coordinates, take your time and tell me what you see. You don't know. You don't know what area in the world I'm asking you to go to. All you've got is coordinates.
Correct.
And you and your psychic ability would travel there and say, well, Malcolm, don't laugh. I saw the Brooklyn Bridge, for instance. I'm just speculating. Saw the Brooklyn Bridge, and I'll just open an envelope and say, there's what I was wanting you to see, And so remote viewing, as we know, many powers, more so America, studied and had remote viewers on their payroll in the army, and they used them during the Cold War, etc., which is too much to go into here. So remote viewing and astral traveling is just part and parcel of this wonderful, wonderful psychic world that we all, each and every one of us, live in. And I just wished I could astral travel myself. And maybe in my astral travels, my favourite football team, Hibernian, might actually win a game of football.
I like that. Can we quickly have a look at is it Craig Lusker Reservoir?
Yeah, for sure. The Craig Lusker Reservoir case, I think that was in 1994, if memory serves me correct, February. A gentleman by the name of Ian McPherson. Again, another man not interested in UFOs, a man who had, like us all, had seen the odd bit in the telly and read about it in the newspapers, but just a normal to goodness guy. He was also a painter. He was an artist, and he took his easel and his paints down to Craig Lusker Reservoir, which is near Dunfermline in Fife in central Scotland, 1994, to paint Craig Lusker Reservoir. But before he did that, he was going to take photographs of the area. He was going to take photographs first. And when he was taking the photographs, he became aware of a humming sound. And he went, well, what is that? What is that noise? And initially he thought that it was perhaps the big electricity pylons that crisscrossed the land. If anybody stands underneath these pylons, sometimes you can hear a resonance, a low buzzing sound. So initially he thought it was that, but then it got louder and louder and louder. And he went, what is that? And he turned round and he was astonished to see like a hat-shaped device, not like a bowler hat. If you took the roundness of a bowler hat, maybe like a pork pie hat shape in the sky. And it was silver. And they went, what on earth is that? So he went to get his camera, but he found that he couldn't take a photograph. He was like encased in this, what Jenny Randles calls the Oz factor. It was like he was encased in a Victorian bell jar with these stuffed animals, but just the glass over the top of him. He couldn't hear the low rumble of the traffic on the nearby roads. He couldn't hear the bird song. Everything was just quiet, apart from him and this strange pork pie hat shape in the sky. Suddenly, thankfully, he came out of this whatever he was in and managed to rattle off 2 photographs. Now, this was pre-digital. It was a SLR camera, 35mm camera. And in the first photograph, you can clearly see the object, but not the full object, because he said, as he lined up to take the photograph, the top part of this 2-tiered object descended. It telescoped into the main body of the craft, flipped on its side, and shot away at an incredible speed. Again, like all investigations, Bob, we checked with the police, the airports, the Ministry of Defence, flying clubs, etc., and nothing was in the air at that time. And so not only do we have, thankfully, a photograph of what the witness claims to be a UFO, we have his testimony as well for what it's worth.
Interesting, that one. What time we got to? We're all right for time yet. The Palmont Reservoir case.
Yeah, that's another one. And Palmont Reservoir, I think this was 1991. Phil Trevis, he was near Grangemouth Petrochemical Plant, which is a big oil refinery near Falkirk in Grangemouth. And he was there to take photographs of it at night time. And he was there with a friend, and then suddenly they became aware of this red ball-shaped object that flew very quickly from an area called the Ocho Hills and over to their area. And it stopped about 100, 200 feet above their head, and it started to descend on the 2 frightened men. Phil Trevis got his camera, he leant over backwards, and he managed to take a photograph of the underside of this object. And you can see the black sky. You can see that the part of this object is concave on the underside, and it's thrown off lots of light around about it. That photograph has been in one of my books. It's quite well known. And we still don't know truly what the gentleman photographed. Skeptics have said that, well, that could be anything. You've got a dark sky, you've got a red dot circular object, throwing out light. That could be anything. And they're right. It could be anything. You know, we're taking the witness testimony at face value along with the photograph. And at the end of the day, that's all we can do. We've got to listen to people. It's my job to ensure that nobody's trying to pull the wool over our eyes to get their name in the newspapers or 5 minutes of fame on the telly or whatever.
Yeah.
All we're trying to do is just get answers. And I know nothing, Bob. I've been in this field for over 45 years or more, and I would like to think I know a little, but no, I don't have the answers. I know nothing. I'm just a guy who has been very, very fortunate to speak to many, many people, the length and breadth of the British Isles, with some incredible tales. And the reason I write my books is not for money. You don't make money. Ask John Hanson or anybody else. You don't make money with books.
No.
Not these books. And
Right.
the reason I write them is to get the stories out, because somebody somewhere in Barnsley or Swindon or Colchester will put their hands up and say, I saw that. I can relate to that, you know. So it's a jigsaw. It's a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, there's more people coming out now and talking about the sightings. Like before, they were frightened of getting ridiculed.
Yeah. I mean, your good friend, my good friend, Bill Rourke, Alien Bill, you've had him on your show, I believe.
Yeah, aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I've got 2 or 3 of Bill's
yeah, that's
stories
true.
in I've got some of his stories in the latest book. I'll just, if I may, I'd like to share just a few of his strange, bizarre stories. For any listener who
Yes,
doesn't know
please.
who, yeah, for anybody who doesn't know who Alien Bill is, he lives in New York. He's taken some astonishing photographs of strange things in the sky, but I just want to talk about some of the more ghostly aspects of Alien Bill. Now, Alien Bill and his wife Vicky, they had a dog called Rocky, which sadly passed away. It was half Chihuahua and half King Charles Spaniel, about the size of a terrier. Now, a couple of days after it passed away, Bill was looking out the back garden and he saw Rocky as clear as day. Some skeptics will say, oh, they've just lost the dog. It's just imagination. It's wishful thinking. But it didn't stop there, because he
Yeah.
also was lying in bed and he felt the bed depressed down as if a small dog had jumped up on it. They also heard in the living room scratching noises on the furniture, which Rocky used to do. And but one of probably the most incredible ones was Bill Rourke was walking at the top of the stairs in his home, ready to walk down the stairs, and who is sitting at the foot of the stairs looking up at him? Little Rocky. He went, wow. Now he looked solid. Bill started walking slowly down towards his dead dog, and it just disappeared. It disappeared. It was gone. Then I think it was about September a couple of years ago, September 2020, that's when it was. Bill had just came back from the Lysander Arms in Rockcliffe near York, and he was on his push bike, and the rain was pouring down, and then he suddenly found himself in an area that he's never cycled before, and he went, how did I get here? He was on this little lane, this footpath, trees on the left, trees on the right, and it was pouring a rain. Then he looked along the lane and he saw this black figure, this hooded black shape, a female form, black, walking towards him. And he moved his bike to let her pass, and he says, Malcolm. I looked under her cape and where the face should be, and there were no face there. And she walked by him. The rain did not appear to be penetrating the cloth, the material she was wearing, and she walked past him. And then Bill says, that's it, I've got to get a photograph. And as soon as he lined up the camera to take a photograph of this mysterious lady in black, she disappeared and was gone. And then another strange thing was my good friend Chris Evers. He puts on the Outer Limits Conference, and I was there in 2022 in the Freedom Centre in Hull,
Yeah.
as was Bill. And Bill, it's quite a funny story, this, but that's what the psychic phenomena is like. It is bizarre. What happened was this. Bill went into the gents' toilets. Nobody was there. Nobody was in the cubicles. Nobody was there. And as Bill was drying his hands, he heard in his ear, "You're right, mate." This voice, this old man's voice, and it's, he scared the bejesus out of him, and nobody was there. Now, we do know that area is haunted. But probably the most bizarre thing that happened at the Freedom Centre at the Outer Limits Conference in 2022 was the following. And I'm sure your listeners will find this very bizarre. They may not believe it. I found it hard to believe, but here we go. Here's what happened. Would you believe it? I was on the stage talking about the Socky poltergeist at the time. So Bill Rourke was there with his wife Victoria and a lovely lady by the name of Kathy Cogliano from Massachusetts in the United States, good friends of ours. So they're all sitting in a row.
Yeah, I know.
You know what? Yeah. And
Yeah.
they're all sitting in a row at the end of the auditorium. And I'm doing my business, talking away. And then suddenly, here's what happened. An arm from fingertip to the elbow suddenly appeared majestically in front of them, just above their knees. They could have grabbed it. It wasn't an old man's hand. It wasn't wrinkled. There were no rings on it. And it was like black material or a black jacket. It tapered away and disappeared. No. Fuzziness at the end of the elbow. And it slowly moved from right to left, in front of the knees of Alien Bill, front of the knees of Vic, and also Kathy Cogliano, and it disappeared. And it's just absolutely bizarre, you know. And as I say, I'm so privileged to speak to people who's had a multitude of stories. And your good friend Paul Sinclair, I love his books, fantastic books, you know, proof books, wonderful. And I urge any listener who hasn't got any Paul Sinclair books, please go out, get on Amazon, buy them. They're amazing. Really educational if you want some good stuff on the paranormal.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Rebecca just saying, Kathy said the toilets were haunted. And then she said, Rebecca said, you were sat behind me, Malcolm, at the conference, that conference you were at.
All right. Yeah. That obviously that's not when that Aram happened though. But yeah, I was
Right.
at the back of the conference myself. Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. Another
But I
question
mean,
from Rebecca.
yeah.
Malcolm, I know some big conferences all over the world. Were there any particular countries where the audience was more attentive or interactive than?
Is that with my lectures or anybody's lectures?
About your lecturers, I think.
Yeah.
Are they more attentive or interactive than others?
Well, hopefully I don't put too many people to sleep. I probably do. And apologies to those who's had a good sleep. No, I mean, all I try to do is just tell it as it is. I mean, there's no airs and graces about me. I just tell it as it is. And my hero back in my day, getting back to the top of the show when we started, was my hero was Jenny Randalls. And I used to go down to London to the Gufora meetings and also Sheffield. And I just thought she was marvellous. It's such a shame she's not doing many lectures now. But she was a highlight of my career, as was Bruce Maccabee, Bertil Kuhleman from Sweden, and a lot of people. I mean, I've had great conversations with John Keel, William Moore, who co-wrote the Philadelphia experiment, Jacques Vallée, I've spoken to him. I've spoken to some of the big names in the world of ufology, you know, Jesse Marcel Jr. His father, as you know, he brought back the found debris in Mac Brazel's ranch in Roswell. And so, you know, young, I think he was only a young boy at the time. And his father brought this silver aluminium material into his bedroom and woke him up. And Jesse said, I remember it, Malcolm. I remember it. I was a small boy. And he put this stuff in my hand and I squeezed it and it curled it up and it suddenly sprung back to where it was, flat, you know, as like a piece of paper. And he says, I'll never ever forget it. My father was so excited. He says, my father was in the Air Force. Obviously, he knew his stuff. He had never seen any material like this. And so, obviously, as we know, they initially said it was a weather balloon. It was crash test dummies. It was this, it was that. But yes, I've had the good fortune to speak to many people who's told me incredible stories. And like I said a moment or two ago, it's all about getting these stories into the books so Joe public can really find out what's going on in this strange world of ours.
Exactly, Malcolm. Well, coming on the show, it's been fascinating as always. Where can people get in touch with you and where can they buy your books?
They can get in touch with me through Facebook, and just look for me on Facebook, and they can buy my books from Amazon. And I'm the author of 12 books at the moment, and a combination of UFOs, ghosts, also Loch Ness. They've been featured in, they've been printed in Germany and France as well. I'm also working on a book with Ron Halliday, a fellow Scottish researcher, all about Bonnybridge. Now, whilst Bonnybridge has been in one of my books, one chapter was about Bonnybridge, this will be a warts and all, how Bonnybridge evolved for me, and also Ron Halliday, who also investigated it.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That will be good, Malcolm.
I could also say
thank you to everybody in the chat room. Thank you to Rebecca, Steph. Go on.
Sorry, there is a slight delay in between
Go
you
on,
speaking
Malcolm.
and me speaking. I would also say that anybody who wants to come along to the next conference is at the Queen Margaret Union in Glasgow University on June the 15th. It's a Scottish UFO and Paranormal Conference, and we have a lot of wonderful speakers there. If any listeners want to come along to that, drop me an email. My email is Malky, that's MALCKYSPI @yahoo.com. Happy to give you all the information.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I'm sure Alien Bill will be there.
He definitely will.
Yes, well, thank you so much. Thank you to Rebecca, Steph, Malcolm, Diane. There's loads of them in the chat room. Malky. Thank you for all the questions as well. It helps to make the show a lot better with different questions for asking him as well. So it's been fascinating. I've got a terrific guest on my show next Wednesday. You won't have heard about her. I'm going to hopefully make a film about her life in India. Rags to riches, they call it. Gillian Aslam. How she went from being homeless and hungry to a successful banker, professional turned celebrity, author, motivational speaker, trainer. You know, she lived. Oh, it was awful conditions. She lived under a stairwell. Her and 7 children, with a mom and dad and everything. Dad was in the army, lost everything. He died, just left a mom, and they had nowhere to live but under a stairwell. That's all going to be talked about next Wednesday. What day is that? The 8th. Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And the name is, if you Google the name, it's Gillian Allen. JILLIANSLAM. You'll find a lot about her out there. She's fantastic. Last time she was on my show was 10 years ago. So she's probably lots have happened since then. She flies over to India now and feeds the homeless out there as well. She's a fabulous lady, absolutely wonderful lady. Anyway, thank you, Malcolm. Thank you to everybody else. Everybody have a lovely weekend and take care.